The following period has been made available to the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee and the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee for a pre-recorded program furnished by the committees. On Friday, President Johnson attacked Richard Nixon, saying, "If you will look back over his record, you will find that he never did really recognize or realize what was going on when he had an official position in the government." Yesterday, former President Eisenhower said, "Dick Nixon, for whom I have always had the highest personal and official regard, was one of the best informed, most capable, and most industrious vice presidents in the history of the United States, and in that position contributed greatly to the sound functioning of our government. He was constantly informed of the major problems of the United States during my administration. Any suggestion to the contrary, or any inference that I at any time held Dick Nixon in anything less than the highest regard and esteem is erroneous. I present to you the former Vice President of the United States, Richard M. Nixon."
Good afternoon. As you have no doubt gathered from that introduction, I was subjected last week to one of the most savage personal assaults ever leveled by the President of the United States against one of his political opponents. Now, I suppose that I should take cover in the light of such an assault. After all, I'm somewhat of an expert on the towering temper of Lyndon Johnson, and I know the awesome power of the office that he holds. But I would remind President Johnson that I've been abused by experts, and I would also express to him my gratitude for his having been present at the airport when I returned from Caracas in 1958, and when I returned from Moscow after my meeting with Mr. Khrushchev in 1959. I shall answer the attack that President Johnson has leveled against me. I shall answer it not because I answer it for myself, but because unless I speak out, others who have more to risk might not speak out. I shall answer it not for myself. I shall answer it because of a great principle that is at stake. It is the principle of the right to disagree, the right to dissent, the right to disagree with any government official, even the President of the United States. I speak tonight in behalf of the Republican Party, but I ask all of you who listen to think not just of that party or of the Democratic Party, but to think for the next few minutes of what is best for America. America today is in great trouble abroad and at home. Abroad, we are engaged in the third largest war in our history, and we have no program to bring it to an end. At home, we find that we are faced with skyrocketing prices and no program to stop it. And across this nation, we find that crime is rising at the highest rate in history, and no program to do anything about it. What America needs is new leadership. What America needs is great leadership. And where does America get great leadership? Let us turn to Washington, D.C. and see what the situation is there. We could get leadership from the President of the United States. And if the President does not provide it, we turn to the Congress. But before the President left for Manila, he made a statement about this Congress that I now remind you of. He referred to the record of that Congress in glowing terms, as I would expect him to. But in referring to that Congress, he said, "My Congress did this and that and the other thing." Did you know that in the whole history of the United States, there's never been a president, Democrat or Republican, who's ever referred to the Congress as "my Congress"? Now, the reason for that is that no president in history before President Johnson could truly state that, because, as Postmaster General O'Brien pointed out last week, this Congress has a higher record of doing just what the President wanted than any Congress in history. There's another reason that no president ever said "my Congress," because, you see, that isn't the American system. The Congress of the United States doesn't belong to the President. The Congress of the United States doesn't belong to Lyndon Johnson. The Congress of the United States belongs to the people. And that is what this election is about. It is because we need to have in the Congress of the United States men who will stand up for the president when he is right, but men who will stand up for the people when the president is wrong. It is for that reason that when the people go to the polls on Election Day, they must elect more Republicans. They must strengthen what I term the loyal opposition. Now, in referring to this particular problem, I do not mean to suggest that everything the president does is wrong. But the reason we have a Congress is that our founding fathers knew the danger of one-man government. They knew the danger of one-party government. They didn't want to have one-man government or one-party government in America. And consequently, that is why they set up the Congress as a co-equal but responsible branch of the government. But today, you see, we have one-man, one-party government. You can do something about it. You can do something about it by going to the polls on Election Day and electing men, and it will be in this case Republicans, because they will not be subjected to the arm twisting that their Democratic colleagues must be submitted to. Electing those men to the new Congress, which will take office in January. Now, what would it mean? What would it mean to America if there were not a Johnson Congress, but a People's Congress? Let me turn now to the great issue of our time, the issue of Vietnam. And in discussing that issue, let us think first in terms of where we agree. I am proud that the Republican Party has provided for President Johnson the support for his goal of no reward for aggression that his own party has denied him. Because you see, this is the first war in America's history in which a president has been unable to unite his own party behind a war. And I can also tell you that I have traveled all over the world since this war began, and I have defended our policy, the Johnson policy, the American policy in Vietnam, in every capital in Europe and in most of the capitals of Asia. I have defended that policy all over the United States, and I will continue to do so. But on the other hand, we must recognize that while we support the goal of no reward for aggression, and we do that because when the lives of American men are involved, the security of America must come before all party considerations. While we support that goal, it is the responsibility of the loyal opposition to indicate how we can better achieve that goal. And that is the area of proper partisan debate in order to strengthen a bipartisan American policy. And so now we turn to how we can better achieve that goal. Let us look at our choice. The administration's policy, in my view, if it is continued without change, commits the United States to a war in Vietnam which could last as long as 5 years and which would cost us more casualties than the war in Korea. I do not believe that this kind of a policy is one the United States should resign itself to. I believe we can do better than that. And here, the loyal opposition, I believe, has a responsibility to present those areas where we think the policy could be improved. When President Johnson went to Manila, we were hopeful that he might come back with new solutions to these difficult problems. But the Manila Conference, while it was helpful in other respects, had no effect in bringing this war to an end, in bringing peace nearer. And so consequently, when President Johnson returned from Manila, I broke the moratorium that I had observed on discussion of Vietnam while he was gone for the purpose of asking some questions, I thought in a rational and responsible way. Questions on which reasonable men can disagree, but questions to which the American people are entitled to have answers. Let me tell you what some of those questions were. Let me ask you, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, do not agree with me that the President of the United States, before you vote on November the 8th, next Tuesday, should give you the answer to these questions. First, what kind of a war should we wage in Vietnam? And here, from the Manila communique, many observers gathered the impression that the United States, from now on, would wage the kind of a war and the intensity of a war geared to the intensity of the communist war effort. In other words, we would do what they would do. We would react to their offensives. We would let them call the shots. That, in other words, we understand to be the position of the administration. Now, what is our position, the position of the loyal opposition? It was well stated by President Eisenhower just a few days ago. He urged that whenever the United States is in war, we use maximum military forces in order to bring that war to a conclusion as soon as possible. And what I asked the President was to tell us which policy we were going to have in the future. And then there's a second question. The second question involves something that is very close to the home of every American. And that question is, how many men is this war going to require? And on that score, there's also a basic area of disagreement. Senator Stennis, for example, a few weeks ago said that he thought that next year there would have to be 500,000 men in Vietnam. There are 400,000 today. And some people from the administration have indicated that there could be as many as 600,000. One Pentagon source indicated that the number might have to go to 750,000. That, in other words, seems to be the administration's policy, escalating the number of men on the ground in Vietnam. Now, what is the Republican policy? We say, rather than escalating the number of men on the ground, which is the way the communists want to fight this war, we should make more use of our air and sea power, where we are stronger. And so I asked the President, which way do you choose so that the American people can choose on November the 8th? And then the third question, and this is only three of several that I asked, but three of the more important ones, was how do we finance this war? And here we have a disagreement. For example, Congressman Mahan of Texas, a ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, indicated a week ago that he believed it would be necessary to raise taxes next year in order to stop the rise in the cost of prices and in order to finance the war. The Republican position is that rather than raising taxes, what we ought to do is to cut non-military expenditures. And so I asked the President, which will we do? Are we going to raise taxes or are we going to cut expenses? Now, these three questions the President refused to answer, and I call upon him again to answer these questions so that the American people can choose on November the 8th. Now, in connection with this war effort, there are some other differences that I should point out. For example, in the last session of the Congress, the President called upon the Congress to give him the discretion to send surplus foods to countries abroad who were trading with North Vietnam, our enemy. The Congress refused that permission. The President objected. The Congress refused it because the Republicans were able to get some Democratic support for their amendment. And then there was a second difference. And on this particular difference, the President prevailed. He announced on October the 7th that he was going to approve the guarantee of commercial credits for the sale of products to certain Eastern communist countries Eastern European communist countries. Some of these countries are trading with and aiding the enemy in North Vietnam. In this case, the President said that it was good business to do so, and second, that he thought it was important to build bridges to Eastern Europe. Let me tell you what our position is. I want to help and feed needy people abroad. I also want to build bridges to Eastern Europe. I am also for good business. But I say the lives of American men must always come first. And when any nation trades with or aids an enemy of the United States, I say that that nation shall receive no loans, that it should receive no grants, that it should receive no guarantees of commercial credits, and absolutely no foreign aid of any kind from the United States of America. That's a legitimate difference of opinion. But again, you choose. Do you want to go the Johnson way or the Republican way that I have outlined? We could go on. But in essence, the difference here is that the Republicans believe that it is essential to get new military, economic, and diplomatic policies which will bring this war to an end before 5 years, which the administration's policy seems to commit us to. And we believe we need that new thinking in the new Congress. Having mentioned these points, however, I think it is vitally important to make one thing crystal clear, not just to the American people, but more important to the government of Hanoi and to the government in Peking. Due to the President's assault on me, when the election returns are counted on November the 8th, there might be a tendency to interpret those returns as indicating, when the Republicans do gain, as I believe they will, that this is a repudiation of our strong stand against reward for aggression. Nothing could be further from the truth. Because as a matter of fact, sending more Republicans to the Congress of the United States will call for a stronger policy. And let the enemy make no mistake on this, because if they do make a mistake on this, it will mean that this will prolong the war. I turn now to some issues at home. And of course, the issue which is of vital importance to every family listening to this program is that of the cost of living, the battle of the family budget, rather than just the battle of the federal budget. And here we also have a difference of opinion. Administration officials have several answers to the charges that they have been responsible for inflation. One, they say it isn't very much. And two, they say, well, people are better off in any event. But let's look at the situation. As far as the degree of inflation is concerned, prices have gone up more in the almost 3 years that President Johnson has been president than they have in any 3-year period in the last 15 years. And who has it hurt? It's hurt everybody. It's raised the prices of what the poor pay for their groceries and their clothing. It hurts the aged. As their Social Security and pension payments stay the same, the prices of what they buy go up. It hurts the wage earner because his increases in wages are limited to 3%, whereas prices are going up at the rate of 4%. And now the question is, we know it hurts people. Who did it? And here we have a game of musical chairs. One day the administration blames business for raising prices. And the next day the administration blames labor for asking for more wages. And the next day the administration blames the farmer. But you see, the blame is on this administration. Here's what happened. In January of this year, the Republicans called upon President Johnson to cut non-military spending in order to stop inflation. Instead, he raised the budget by $4 billion. And now we have inflation. And so now we come to the choice. What can we do about it? I noticed that the housewives have been picketing the supermarkets, protesting. The difficulty is they're picketing the wrong place. They ought to be picketing the White House. And I would suggest this, that if, rather than just protesting, the housewives and others want to do something about the high cost of living, the thing to do is to go to the polls on Election Day. Make that day National Price Protest Day. And on that day, vote to bring the spenders home from Congress and vote to send the savers down to Congress. Let's have a People's Congress, more Republicans in Congress who will stand up for you on this issue of stopping the rising cost of living. And now could I turn to one other issue? And this probably is more important in the long run than even this terrible war in Vietnam, which one day will be over, we know, and this inflation, which also will pass, because this involves the future of America, the kind of America that we want for our children. Looking at America, looking to the future, if we elect another Johnson Congress this November, there will come before that Congress new bills. Those bills will be passed, and America will be made over before we have a chance to elect another president in 1968. And so the question arises, what do we want in the way of America for the future? Let me tell you what that different America will be if we get another Johnson Congress. It will be an America in which a majority of the American people, not just those who need it, will have their rent subsidized by the government, and everybody else will have to help pay for it. It will be an America in which all of the American people will have their income guaranteed at $3,000 a year by the government, and it will be paid to them whether they work or not. It will be an America in which the decisions as to what will be taught in our schools will be made not by local school districts, but by bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. Now, some might well ask, what's wrong with all that? Government's going to be paying our rent. Government's going to be paying us an income whether we work or not. Government's going to tell us what to teach the kids. This, they say, would be a great society. I beg to disagree. America is a great country. And will you remember this if you forget everything else I say today? America is a great country. And America became a great country because for 190 years we have proceeded on a great principle. America became great not because of what government did for people, but because of what people did for themselves. And it is this principle that is at stake. And it is here again that you can choose whether we go down that road or whether we choose a road of progress through turning toward people rather than toward bigger and bigger government in Washington. And now, my fellow Americans, in conclusion, I want to make a statement that perhaps is different from anything that has ever occurred on television in a political campaign. I understand that the President of the United States may be listening to this program tonight. And I want to direct these comments to him personally. Mr. President, for 14 years, I had the privilege of serving with you in Washington. I respected you then. I respect you now. I respect you for the great office you hold, an office that we both sought and that you won. I respect you for the great energies you devote to that office. And my respect has not changed because of the personal attack you made on me. You see, I think I understand how a man can be very, very tired and how his temper then can be very short. And if a vice president or a former vice president can be bone weary and tired. How much more tired would a president be after a journey like yours? I remember that President Eisenhower, during the years of the conferences when he made the great decisions about Quemoy and Matsu, Lebanon, others that meant the difference between war and peace, was always the coolest man in the room. And I urge you, Mr. President, with your vast energies, conserve them, so that when the great decisions are made, you will be at your best. I urge you also, put aside all of the trivial protocol matters which sometimes I know must burden you, so that you can spend the time that the nation wants you to spend on thinking about these great problems. On November the 8th, you know and I know that more Republicans are going to be elected to the Congress. They will not be yes men, but they will be patriotic men, as you are a patriotic man. I urge you to listen to them, to talk to them, to talk to the Republican leaders, to bring them together. Because if one man in either party has an idea that could shorten this war, that could save an American life, that idea must be heard. It will help you, but more important, it will help America. And I say in conclusion that despite our past disagreements, you have my complete support as you work for the cause of peace with freedom abroad, and as we both work for the cause of progress through freedom at home. And now, my fellow Americans, to all of you who have given up some of your television time to listen to this political broadcast, my thanks. To those of you who have agreed with me, my appreciation. To those of you who may have disagreed, my respect. And to all of you, whether you have disagreed or agreed, vote on November the 8th, so that this decision will be a decision by a majority of the American people. Thank you, and good afternoon.
Remember, America deserves a better way. Vote Republican on Tuesday. This is too great a country for one-man government. Great leadership emerges from a strong two-party system. Let's restore a strong two-party system on November 8th. Vote Republican.